The Kosher Division at TMR, 1938 to 1945. The Kosher Divisions at TMR. In part due to the efforts of the Jewish Committee on Scouting for Greater New York, the number of Jewish boys in New York City troops and packs soared. Many of these Jewish scouts attended summer camp at the 10-mile River Scout camps, creating a tremendous demand for kosher food. The camp leadership organized kosher dining halls at TMR, and the staff tried to keep them kosher. At this time, a New York City Boy Scout typically attended a summer camp affiliated with his home borough. The term Kosher Division referred to the 2 Brooklyn camps and 1 Bronx camp that offered kosher feeding following the Jewish dietary laws, or kashrut. The 10-mile River Scout camps was organized into borough camps, with 1 summer camp for each of the 5 New York City boroughs, with kosher and non-kosher divisions. Camp Ranaqua, Bronx, 1 kosher and 1 non-kosher division. Camp Brooklyn, 2 kosher and 2 non-kosher divisions. Camp Man, Queens, 3 non-kosher divisions. Camp Manhattan, 2 non-kosher divisions. Camp Aquahonga, Staten Island, 1 non-kosher division. While scouts mainly attended their own borough camps, Jewish scouts could request to attend a kosher feeding division from another borough if his borough camp did not provide kosher feeding. The kosher feeding divisions were very popular and were usually filled first. The Queens and Manhattan camps had substantial numbers of Jewish scouts but didn't offer kosher feeding. Volunteers constructed synagogues in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan borough camps. Role of the United Synagogue of America. In October 1929, Executive Director Samuel M. Cohen informed an Inquirer that the United Synagogue of America supervised the kosher mess of 5 or 6 camps serving Greater New York and Chicago, arranged Jewish religious programs for these camps, and appointed rabbis who were in charge of this work. It arranged Jewish festival celebrations for Jewish Boy Scouts in the Greater New York area, including the Lag Bomer celebration in a stadium, and published the monthly Scout Menorah newsletter for Jewish Boy Scouts. 6,000 copies monthly. Camp rabbis at the 10-mile River Scout camps. The camp rabbis looked after the spiritual welfare of the Jewish scouts while at camp and provided other religious and educational services. They were sometimes student rabbis from organizations including the Jewish Theological Seminar, with no previous knowledge of the Boy Scouts of America or summer camp. Each camp rabbi was typically paid $100 for the summer. A camp rabbi was assigned to each of the 2 Brooklyn kosher divisions, D1 and D2, 1 to the Camp Ranaqua Kosher Division, Unit C, and 1 to cover both Camp Man Queens and Camp Manhattan, which did not have kosher kitchens. By 1941, Camp Man and Camp Manhattan each had their own camp rabbi. Camp Aquahonga did not have sufficient Jewish scouts to justify its own camp rabbi. The camp rabbis, spiritual welfare of the scouts, Jewish religious services were provided daily in most camps, although poorly attended, with greater attendance at services held on Friday evenings and on Saturday mornings. Camp Manhattan held Jewish services on Sunday mornings to be consistent with the Catholic and Protestant religious services organized at the same time. Depending on the number of Jewish scouts attending Camp Aquahonga, they were either driven to a camp offering religious services, typically Camp Ranaqua, or a camp rabbi was driven to Camp Aquahonga to hold services for the scouts. Some camps organized and trained scouts for camp choirs. Jewish scouts of the proper age were able to hold their bar mitzvah during summer camp. Special services were conducted in the evening and morning in recognition of Tisha B'Av. The camp rabbis, compliance with dietary laws. By 1938, camp rabbis at the TMR kosher divisions were responsible to ensure that their kitchens were kept strictly kosher. This typically required the complete separation of pots, pans, and cutlery used for the preparation and consumption of meat and dairy meals. The camp rabbis inspected the kosher camp kitchens regularly. They also reviewed the menus of foods used for overnight hikes to ensure that they were kosher. Cooking and eating equipment used by hikers also had to be kept kosher, sometimes requiring the use of paper plates and cutlery. Starting in 1941, the camp rabbis and multiple camp inspection visits by teams of rabbis found problems with the kosher kitchens, eventually requiring major changes in their construction and operations. In 1945, Director of Camping Al Nichols Jr. recommended that rabbis be hired solely to ensure the kosher status of each camp kitchen. The camp rabbis' Jewish education. The camp rabbi maintained the camp library of books of Jewish interest provided by the United Synagogue of America and later by the Jewish Education Committee of New York. He also provided Hebrew and bar mitzvah lessons. The camp rabbi typically spoke to Jewish campers individually and explained the necessity of taking interest in Jewish life. At Camp Ranaqua, the camp rabbi told campers stories of Jewish life at Friday evening services. In 1939, Camp Rabbi Dembowitz provided Hebrew and bar mitzvah classes to approximately 20 Jewish scouts in both divisions. Camp rabbis at the Brooklyn camps regularly held lectures and discussions for older scouts dealing with contemporary Jewish problems. The camp rabbi's interaction with scouts. The camp rabbi acted as a big brother to scouts regardless of their religion. He discussed personal problems with some of the campers and spoke to the scouts' parents about their children's problems. The camp rabbi attended with homesick scouts and discipline problems. He visited sick campers in the hospital, individual campers in their campsites, and participated in the camper activities, sometimes as arbiters and umpires for the various camp sports. The Camp Brooklyn rabbis typically accompanied weekly camp inspection parties and participated in the Saturday evening camp-wide council fires. Jewish scouts filled out questionnaires to discover their backgrounds and ideas. The camp rabbis' interaction with other camp chaplains. The camp rabbis attended camp religious services conducted by both Catholic and Protestant chaplains, and relations with them were typically excellent. The camp rabbis' interaction with non-Jews and the camp staff was generally very positive. Many non-Jews, including the Catholic parson and Protestant minister, were invited to attend the Jewish services. TMR director Al Nichols Jr. sometimes attended the Jewish services. The borough camps. Camp Ranaqua, Bronx. The camp was organized into two operational units. Unit C was the kosher unit and Unit E was the non-kosher unit. Soon after the camp opened in 1929, Bronx volunteers constructed the camp synagogue on the hill overlooking Unit C. It had a permanent ark, reading desk, Sefer Torah, prayer shawls, skullcaps, and prayer books. In 1938, over the 8-week camp season, 1,892 Jewish scouts and 24 Catholic scouts attended Unit C, and 24 Jewish scouts attended Unit E. Unit C had services on Friday evenings and Saturday mornings, which were attended by all scouts, including Jewish scouts from Unit E. Many Jewish scouts in Unit E desired to go to Unit C, but were unable due to lack of facilities. A considerable number of Jewish scouts did not attend camp at all due to limited facilities in Unit C. Saturday morning services also typically included a few Jewish scouts from Camp Aquahonga, Staten Island. A bar mitzvah was held in camp in 1939. The borough camps, Camp Brooklyn. In 1938, between 300 to 600 Jewish scouts attended the two kosher camps each 2-week period, including scouts who ate in the non-kosher division because of lack of facilities. All the scouts recited in unison the blessings before and after each meal. Waiters were given periodic instruction concerning the use of dishes and silverware. The two kosher mess halls were under constant supervision of the two camp rabbis. All silverware and other metal vessels were stamped with either M, meat, or D, dairy, to prevent intermixing. 2 large wooden boxes, also marked M and D, were constructed and contained the silverware, when not in use, was under lock and key. All menus of overnight hikers were inspected and confirmed kosher. Each meal was introduced and followed by a recitation of grace in uniform. The kosher units were very overcrowded at the heights of the season. A new, larger kitchen was considered urgently needed. From private conversations with scouts, it was learned that with a larger kosher unit, attendants would move to it from the non-kosher units. Religious services in the kosher units were held outdoors every Friday evening and Saturday morning. Attendance was voluntary and totaled 200 to 400 persons. All scout activities were suspended during services. Efforts to conduct daily morning services were very difficult due to the lack of a centrally located chapel. The camp rabbis felt that attendance at services must be made compulsory. In 1938, for the first time at the Brooklyn camps, religious services in the non-kosher units were held Sunday mornings. Attendance was compulsory and totaled between 100 to 150 persons. The 3 chaplains, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, organized the camp-wide General Assembly and flag-raising ceremony. Following the ceremony, everyone divided up into 3 groups, each which held their own religious service. On July 4, 1939, the two camp rabbis requested a special assembly at sundown on Independence Day. They provided a prayer for our country and a message of good citizenship. The first choir in camp history was organized. Parents of scouts whose 13th birthday fell during the camp period were contacted and persuaded to schedule their son's bar mitzvah at camp. 4 bar mitzvahs were held at camp in the month of August alone. The two Camp Brooklyn rabbis supervised the construction of the new synagogue. A special service dedicated the new synagogue, with distinguished visitors and a large group of visiting parents. This was considered the most important and beautiful service of the entire summer at Camp Brooklyn. On the last Sabbath of camp, non-Jewish camp directors and chaplains were invited to attend services. The borough camps. Camp Man, Queens. Camp Man did not offer kosher feeding. In 1939, a total of 599 Jewish scouts and 1,497 Christian scouts attended Camp Man over the 4 two-week period season. Religious services were held Friday evenings at 7:15 p.m. with a 45% attendance and Saturday mornings at 7:30 a.m. with a 70% attendance. In 1940, religious services were held Friday evenings and Saturday mornings. Educational activities included a Hebrew sing on Friday evenings, including both staff and scouts, and a candlelight friendship meeting. Contributions were collected for the repair of the Jewish chapel. According to the camp rabbi, services were quite successful and were frequently attended by Christians. Scouts were very active in the service, and a number of them, after some coaching, acted as cantors. The borough camps. Camp Manhattan. In 1939, Camp Manhattan did not offer kosher feeding. A total of 1,222 Jewish scouts and 627 Christian scouts attended over the 4 two-week period season. Religious services were held Friday evenings at 5:15 p.m. with a 45% attendance. This was considered low due to competing camp activities. Sunday morning services were held at 7:45 a.m. in July and at 9 a.m. in August. The Jewish, Protestant, and Catholic religious denominations in camp held their services at the same time, and all other camp activity was suspended. As a result, 95% of the Jewish scouts participated. A bar mitzvah of a scout took place on a Sunday morning in July. One evening, Camp Rabbi Shane told the entire camp a story, which served as the evening activity. The camp rabbi asked the Jewish scouts their preference and found that many of them wanted to have their meals in a kosher mess hall. This was not available in Camp Manhattan at that time. In 1944, the site was approved for a Jewish chapel at Camp Manhattan.